will notice that the elegant gray-haired alien woman at the records desk flinched every time someone walked past without acknowledging her, and decided to change that. William Montgomery, a man of quiet resolve and gentle demeanor, approached the records desk in the bustling colony hall. The room hummed with activity as aliens from various species moved about their daily tasks, engaged in hushed conversations, or absorbed in work at individual stations. Will cleared his throat softly, drawing Selaria Vor'Maethi's attention away from her meticulous record keeping. Her eyes lifted slowly, revealing a surprise and an immediate tensing of posture that spoke volumes before she could even try to hide it behind the veil of professionalism ingrained into her role as invisible keeper of documents. "Thank you for helping me with my permit application," Will said calmly but warmly, his words carrying sincerity rather than formality. "I appreciate your assistance." Selaria's gaze flickered towards him briefly before darting away again, almost too quickly to read. A small tremor ran through her hands as she laid down the data tablet in front of her and stood up straighter under Will's earnest tone. Her crystalline hair shimmered softly when a stray light caught it, a delicate hue now dulled from its youthful brilliance. It's nothing," she replied, managing only to whisper through tight lips, clearly taken aback by his unexpected kindness. Will stepped closer slightly and met her eyes with an open, unflinching gaze. There was something in him that recognized the silent plea of loneliness echoing beneath Selaria's self-imposed armor, a kindred spirit who knew what it felt like to be overlooked after years of giving so much without asking for anything back. He offered one more reassuring nod before turning to leave, but as he did so, his voice called out gently over her shoulder, "You're welcome to visit the agricultural center anytime, if you wish." The hallway was empty when Selaria finally looked up again from where she had slumped into her chair upon Will's departure. Her hands were clenched tightly around the edges of her desk, as if trying to anchor herself within the fabric of reality that seemed utterly surreal and fragile now. A single tear tracked down one cheek, reflecting in its path a memory long buried beneath layers of isolation and sorrow of younger days when she was vibrant, desirable, revered among her people for her beauty and intelligence. Those days were as distant as they were fleeting. Hours passed unremarkably. After that brief encounter, Selaria continued with her work diligently, but now there lingered an unsettling buzz in the air around here, a palpable reminder of Will's unexpected words, still lingering in ears once too numb to hear them. She could feel eyes upon her, a shift from indifference to curiosity amongst colleagues and strangers alike as news spread through colony whispers that Selaria Vor'Maethi had been spoken to directly by none other than William Montgomery. Yet amidst the flurry of speculation about his motives or peculiarities, one thing remained clear: she was still alone in every meaningful sense. At dusk, Will returned from a day spent among crops and fields, carrying with him not just dirt-stained pants, but also an idea he couldn't shake off. He made his way back to the records room under cover of darkness when fewer people would notice or judge. The door creaked quietly in his hands as Selaria looked up sharply upon hearing it open again. But this time there was no immediate turning away. Instead, her breath caught briefly before she managed a cautious smile that seemed more an act than genuine emotion, yet spoke volumes about how much she yearned for any sign of human connection. "Good evening," Will greeted softly as he stepped inside, placing two small potted plants beside the desk. "Thought you might enjoy having some company here." Selaria's hand hovered over them momentarily before lifting gently to touch leaves and petals with reverence akin to discovering an old friend returned from afar. A flicker of warmth lit her eyes, then something long dormant stirring under layers years deep. "Thank you," she managed, voice hoarse yet softer somehow, without the habitual defensiveness that usually guarded it. Will smiled genuinely, a rare sight, but one Selaria felt keenly now more than ever before when faced with its sincerity. "Maybe we can work together sometime," he suggested hesitantly, but earnestly, enough to make her heart stutter in an unfamiliar rhythm once again. Before she could respond, though, and perhaps knowing instinctively how fragile this new connection still was, Will nodded and turned towards the door, leaving it open behind him just a crack, as if offering more than merely plants or casual conversation. Outside, he continued down hallway shadows that seemed somehow less oppressive now after all. There were always paths where others didn't dare tread. Inside those rooms shroud these in quiet desperation, however, lay another kind of awakening beginning to take root, a seedling fragile, yet strong enough perhaps to bloom one day amidst harsh realities and forgotten hopes. And for Selaria Vor'Maethi, who had lived so long without seeing beauty outside herself, William Montgomery was suddenly its improbable but undeniable catalyst. And the days at the colony continued in a rhythm both predictable and unremarkable, but there was an undercurrent of change, a quiet hum that Selaria could feel more than see or hear. It started subtly enough. Will began appearing around the records room with increasing regularity. He always came bearing something small yet thoughtful, perhaps a new book on agricultural advancements from Earth, or a rare plant species native to another planet, its delicate leaves catching what little light filtered through the colony's windows. Selaria watched him carefully, at first, her eyes narrowing slightly as if studying an unfamiliar creature that had wandered into her territory. But there was nothing threatening in Will's demeanor. He moved with deliberate calm and carried himself with a quiet dignity that spoke volumes about his character even before words were exchanged. And then one day, she found herself waiting for him to arrive, not because it was expected, but simply because the absence of his presence felt like an anomaly. It wasn't until mid-morning, on what would become another unremarkable Tuesday, that Will's routine took a turn Selaria hadn't anticipated. He entered the room carrying a tray with 2 cups steaming slightly and a small plate holding some kind of bread she couldn't identify from any known culinary traditions across the galaxy. "Selaria," he called softly, setting down his offerings on her desk without waiting for an invitation. "I brought you tea." She blinked slowly in surprise, her eyes tracing every detail of Will's gesture. How he placed 1 cup directly before her and another beside him, positioning himself so that they were seated side by side rather than separated by some invisible barrier. "Tea," she repeated dumbly, glancing from the steaming beverage to his face. He nodded with a reassuring smile, as if reading her hesitation perfectly. "I remembered you said something about finding this kind of plant interesting," Will explained gently, gesturing towards one of the potted plants he had brought before. "Thought we could discuss them while drinking." Selaria's hand hovered over the cup for several long moments before she finally picked it up with trembling fingers. The warmth spread through her hands and into her chest, as if awakening something dormant within. "Thank you, Will," she murmured softly, after taking a tentative sip. It tasted rich, but not overpowering. Something new yet familiar enough to comfort her senses momentarily. Their conversation began around the plant samples he had brought along, discussing potential applications in both traditional agriculture and bioengineering for more innovative solutions on their respective worlds. But as hours ticked by quietly between them, topics shifted from botany and biology towards personal anecdotes about life beyond work responsibilities. Will spoke first of his wife, amidst, woman who had been the love of his life until she was taken away too soon due to an illness that struck suddenly without warning or remedy. Her passing left behind a void no amount of time could fully mend, but it also instilled within him a profound appreciation for every moment still available. Selaria listened intently as Will spoke, her own eyes reflecting the distant sorrow mixed with lingering affectionate memories he shared about Emma's smile and laughed way she would greet each day with an inexplicable joy that seemed to defy all logic. It was bittersweet how much his pain resonated, while also highlighting a tenderness rarely seen among those who surrounded him in their daily lives. But eventually, Will paused as if sensing the turn of conversation approaching, inevitable questions from Selaria about her own life history, an invitation she had never before considered extending to anyone else here on Vexer-Roman 3. Yet somehow, with this man, whose presence felt both foreign and oddly comforting at once, sharing seemed less daunting despite all previous experiences telling otherwise. "Why did your hair faint?" Will asked gently, after a prolonged silence between them while they finished their tea. "Is there something different about aging among me three?" Celaria's hand unconsciously moved to touch her gray crystalline strands before she could stop it, tracing along the edges as if seeking comfort in this tactile reminder of time passing unrelentingly forward. "It signifies a change," Selaria replied softly after clearing her throat. "Once vibrant and full of life, now faded." The admission hung heavily between them for several breaths, until Will reached out to place his hand atop hers, a simple act yet carrying weight beyond words and act. Acknowledgement shared silently but deeply understood by both. "Your hair catches the sunset beautifully," Will said quietly, eyes reflecting sincerity, unclouded by judgment or pretense. It was a statement that felt like an unexpected sunbeam breaking through storm clouds, catching Selaria off guard with its sheer unpredictability and poignancy all at once. "It's gray," she murmured softly in response after several moments of silence following his words. Her fingers tightened briefly around the cup under hers, before releasing it back onto the desk again, as if anchoring herself amidst overwhelming emotions threatening to spill over unchecked. "So is mine," Will said with a warm smile tugging at one corner of his lips. "We match." Selaria looked up sharply, then, catching sight of subtle streaks of silver threading through Will's otherwise dark hair, a stark contrast that didn't diminish but rather complemented the natural warmth emanating from him, invisible rays. "We do," she echoed softly, a hint of genuine curiosity lighting her eyes despite lingering apprehensions rooted deep within. She couldn't help but wonder now if there truly might be more to life than what society dictated and had imposed upon them both, more potential for human connections unburdened by societal expectations or age-related prejudices. Will nodded gently without losing that comforting smile on his face as he continued leaning towards her across their shared workspace. "We do," he affirmed simply yet powerfully, enough to leave an impression far beyond mere words exchanged casually between two strangers who had become more in the span of a few days than many years could ever accomplish alone. And for Selaria Vor'Maethi, that moment held significance extending far beyond simple tea and conversation. It marked something shifting inside her heart, long dormant from enforced solitude. Maybe there was still beauty left to discover even amidst fading lights. Perhaps hope wasn't entirely extinguished after all, but merely waiting quietly under layers of perceived despair. Perhaps today would be the beginning of seeing such truths more clearly through eyes once too numb to perceive them anew. And the sun had set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Selaria's garden in Elysia colony. She was tending to her rare me3 plants under a dim lantern when she noticed Will strolling through the rows of delicate foliage, his silver hair catching the soft glow. He moved with quiet deliberation, pausing occasionally to examine each plant with tender care. "Will," Selaria called out softly as he approached her garden shed where they often spent their evenings discussing plants and life on Earth and beyond. "I didn't expect you so late." He smiled warmly at her from across the distance between them, his eyes reflecting nothing but sincerity and patience, qualities that had become a source of comfort in Selaria's otherwise lonely existence. "I couldn't help thinking about our conversation earlier," Will said as he came closer to join her. "It's remarkable how we both find beauty where others might not." Selaria felt the familiar heaviness settle over her chest, but there was also an unexpected warmth lingering beneath each reminder of his simple yet profound words. "You speak with such conviction," she replied quietly, looking down at her hands as if suddenly finding them fascinating. "I am touched by your perspective." Will stepped closer until he stood beside her under the lantern's light, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. He reached out and brushed a gentle hand across one of her me3 plants before turning to look directly into Selaria's eyes. "And you listen with an open heart," Will said softly, his warm hazel gaze unyielding but full of kindness. "That is rare and beautiful." Selaria bit back the sting that threatened at hearing him compare something so intrinsic yet often overlooked as listening to beauty itself. Yet there was also a strange comfort in being seen this way. Before she could respond further, young me3 males sauntered into view from behind Will's shoulder, their footsteps light and mocking with laughter echoing off distant walls of greenery. They stopped short when they saw Selaria, and then looked at each other knowingly before one spoke up loudly enough for both her and the older human to hear. "Why waste time on a faded one?" he asked mockingly, gesturing towards Will dismissively. "No male would ever choose that." Selaria's heart clenched painfully. In response, she had long grown accustomed to such dismissals, but it still cut deep. She braced herself for another wave of hurt and loneliness. But what followed was not the expected silence or pain-filled retreat. Instead, there came Will's calm yet firm voice cutting through their jesting like a fresh breeze against a stagnant pond. "Because she listens when I speak," he said quietly but clearly to everyone present. "Because she's kind." The young males exchanged blank eyes before bursting into laughter again, as if the statement was ludicrously absurd, while Selaria felt tears pricking at her eyes, despite herself tears, not of sadness, but of something unfamiliar yet overwhelmingly powerful. "And because beauty isn't just about hair," Will added softly, but with unmistakable conviction that seemed to hold its own weight against their taunts. It was as if he had spoken a forbidden truth aloud in defiance of the societal norms they all tacitly adhered by out of fear and resignation rather than any genuine understanding. Selaria's breath hitched at his words, her heart pounding with an unfamiliar sensation, hope tingling through every nerve end like waking from a long dream. Yet she also felt acutely aware that this moment was dangerous. To be seen in such light could mean ostracization by both humans and me3 alike. "I should go," Selaria whispered suddenly, turning away before the young males could mock her further or worse confirm Will's unconventional admiration aloud for all eyes to see. But as she turned to leave, one of them called out sharply after her back, "Selaria Vor'Maethi, you never seem noticed. Maybe you shouldn't try so hard if no male wants your faded self." She froze mid step, but didn't turn around again. The sting was too sharp even now for words. "You listen carefully," Will said calmly, though his tone carried authority she had rarely heard directed towards her before, and it unsettled something deep within. "That's rare and worth more than anyone realizes." Selaria slowly turned back to face him then, their gazes meeting in an unspoken challenge against the mockery of bystanders who now seemed less sure about how they felt or should behave around this unexpected pairing. "Maybe you're right," she whispered softly, after several moments' silence, her voice barely audible above the soft rustle of leaves and distant murmurings from those still watching them. Yet it was enough. Will nodded gently in response, without breaking eye contact, his expression steadfast yet unassuming again, like when discussing everyday matters. But as Selaria turned to leave once more, feeling both lighter somehow despite everything said earlier that night against societal norms binding her existence thus far, she felt tears rolling down her face, not from pain, but relief and perhaps hope rekindled after decades of solitude. She walked away with a light step in the cool air under Will's unyielding gaze, which seemed to affirm his words more powerfully than any spoken declaration ever could. That night Selaria cried for the first time in decades, not from sorrow or regret, but from an overwhelming sense of something shifting within her heart, long dormant beneath layers of enforced invisibility and societal expectations imposed upon aging females by Mithri society. She wept quietly into her pillow later that evening alone, as if cleansing away years of internalized dismissal to make way for a different path forward she had once dared not consider. Selaria's tears were unlike any others. They washed over feelings long suppressed rather than causing them anew, signaling an end to the enforced loneliness and resignation to invisibility. She lay awake for hours after, contemplating Will's words and their profound impact on her soul despite all odds stacked against such unexpected connections blossoming amidst societal prejudice. The next day dawned with a new light in Selaria's eyes as she prepared herself mentally and emotionally for whatever might come. Whether acceptance or rejection from others didn't matter so much anymore, because something had changed within her beyond external validation. She was learning to see beauty differently, through Will's lens of genuine affection, unclouded by societal judgments about age or appearance. And perhaps today would indeed mark the beginning of seeing truths more clearly. Amidst fading lights, maybe hope wasn't entirely extinguished after all, but merely waiting quietly under layers of perceived despair, yet ready now to break free with renewed clarity and courage born from unexpected kindness in an otherwise indifferent world. The morning after Selaria's emotional break through was unusually bright, despite the cool air that clung to her skin as she stepped out of her modest dwelling into the bustling colony square. Will had been right. His words were like a beacon in the dark, illuminating pathways long hidden beneath layers of societal expectations and personal self-doubt. Selaria's crystalline hair shimmered softly under the morning light, its once brilliant sapphire hue dulled to soft gray, a stark symbol of her status as an aging Mithri female. Yet today, even this dull reflection didn't dim her spirit. Something new stirred within her heart, a quiet hope that perhaps not all was lost after all. It wasn't until later in the day when Selaria found herself summoned by Matriarch Velos. A hurried servant arrived at her door with an urgent note, inviting her to the central hall of administration, where matters concerning community and culture were decided under the stern gaze of Mithri tradition's oldest guardians. The summons was unexpected yet unmistakable in its gravity. Will stood outside Selaria's home as she prepared herself for this uncertain meeting. He could see from her demeanor that something wasn't quite right, a mix of anxiety and determination playing across her features. "Selaria," he called out softly before she left the house, his voice carrying an unspoken understanding. "Be strong today." She turned to face him then, a rare smile touching her lips, a fleeting but unmistakable acknowledgment of his presence in her life again. "I will be," Selaria replied quietly. Her eyes met Will's with an unusual warmth. They seemed filled not just by the light streaming into the corridor between them, but also by something new and stirring within her soul. As she made her way towards the central hall where Matriarch Velos awaited her, a sense of foreboding settled over Selaria. Yet there was also resolve mixed in with that uneasy refusal to back down from whatever challenge lay ahead now that she had started on this unexpected path towards self-discovery. The interior halls were cold and imposing as Selaria entered the grand chamber where Velos often presided. Tall, elegant columns lined both sides of a vast expanse of polished stone floors, each surface reflecting the intricate details of her surroundings back at Hera, stark reminder of how meticulously controlled every aspect of Mithri society was designed to be. Matriarch Velos herself sat regally on an elevated platform adorned with symbols of authority and wisdom. Her crystalline hair remained resplendent in its sapphire hue, a testament both to her enduring youth within the context of their culture and also to her power as one who still commanded respect despite having aged far beyond most Mithri females. Velos' eyes narrowed immediately upon seeing Selaria approach. There was no mistaking the disapproving glare with which she greeted the aging female. "Selaria Vor'Maethi," Velos began in a tone that held more than just disappointment, but outright disdain. "You have been summoned here because certain troubling incidents of late require your immediate attention." The matriarch paused momentarily before fixing her gaze squarely upon Selaria's own dulled reflection. "Word has spread among our community about an unusual bond forming between yourself and a human male," Velos continued with unmistakable disapproval. "Agricultural advisor William Montgomery is known for his contributions to this colony. Yes, but such public affection from him towards someone like you on aging Mithri female embarrasses the entire society." Selaria felt her heart sink slightly at these words, even as she stood tall against Velos' stern rebuke. She had expected some resistance, given their societal norms and prejudices about aging, but to be outright dismissed by a figure of such influence was nonetheless disheartening. "Is there something specific you would like me to address, Matriarch?" Selaria asked calmly, despite the inner turmoil churning within her now that this confrontation seemed unavoidable. "Or are these just idle concerns without any actionable cause?" Velos' mouth curled into a thin line at Selaria's retort. Clearly, she hadn't expected such defiance from one whom society had long deemed invisible. "Your insolence is unbecoming of your station," Velos snapped coldly, her tone dripping with disdain. "It becomes necessary to remind you and others who may follow in your misguided footsteps that age brings not only wisdom, but also responsibility." "I understand my responsibilities within our community, Matriarch," Selaria responded evenly now that she had regained some composure under the pressure of Velos' accusations. "But I must ask, what exactly am I being held responsible for here?" Velos leaned forward slightly then, her crystalline hair shimmering as though emphasizing every word through its sapphire brilliance. "Your actions in public are drawing attention away from proper Mithri customs," she intoned gravely, now with an air of finality. "You must cease this behavior immediately or face the consequences of undermining our societal structures." Selaria could feel her stomach twisting uncomfortably at Velo's pronouncement, yet there was also strength building within her despite it, a resolve not to let fear dictate how she lived any longer. "With respect, matriarch," Selaria began carefully while looking directly into those amber eyes lined with authority and age, "I believe I am simply living my life as best I can under circumstances that have left me feeling invisible for far too long. To suddenly find genuine kindness among someone who sees beyond societal judgments, it's liberating." Velo's face hardened further at Selaria's words. Clearly such notions were anathema to the rigid structure upheld by those like herself. "Your liberation is nothing more than a threat to our established ways," Velos countered harshly. "And Mr. Montgomery must understand his role in this matter as well." Selaria felt her heart leap with sudden urgency upon hearing Will's name mentioned so coldly. She turned to leave immediately afterward, fully expecting another audience, but unsure of what awaited her next. Back at Selaria's home once more after the tense encounter, there was an almost palpable air of uncertainty. Yet amidst this turmoil stood William Montgomery himself, waiting for his turn under Velo's questioning gaze, just as Selaria had faced earlier that day. Matriarch Velos called Will into her chambers moments later, with a summons no less formal or intimidating than what she had given to Selaria before him. "William Montgomery," Matriarch Velos intoned sternly upon seeing him enter the grand hall, now devoid of other witnesses. Her crystalline hair shimmered ominously against the stark walls surrounding them, underscoring her authority in every flicker and glimmer. "Yes," Will asked simply yet firmly, as he stood his ground despite being addressed by such a formidable figurehead within Mithri society. "Your presence here should speak volumes about what you've done," Velos began without preamble. "You are aware of the social hierarchy established among our people, correct?" Will nodded quietly, but with evident understanding. Indeed, it was common knowledge that aging females, in particular, were viewed as less desirable and thus often marginalized within Mithri culture. "Then why continue this display?" Velos continued with a sharp edge to her voice. "Selaria Vor'Maethi has lost much of what makes her valuable among us by virtue of age alone, yet you persist in giving attention that only serves to embarrass both parties involved." Will's expression remained composed despite the weighty implications of these words. He had anticipated something along these lines given their earlier interactions. "Matriarch," Will began with clear conviction, "my intention has never been to shame anyone. In fact, quite the opposite. I wish for Selaria not just recognition, but genuine happiness, which she deserves far beyond what societal norms dictate." Velo's eyes narrowed even further at this response. Her tone grew colder still. "Your words may sound noble," she retorted icily now, with a dismissive wave of her hand, "but they ring hollow amidst customs that value youth over experience, beauty over character. How long do you think such an unorthodox arrangement can continue?" Will met Velo's gaze squarely once more before answering, his voice steady yet sincere. "Until it doesn't need to," he stated calmly though firmly enough for his point to be clear through both body language and tone alone. "I see beauty where others do not, because there's far more worth appreciating than just outward appearances or societal expectations." Velos visibly recoiled at Will's bold statement. Never before had she encountered such direct defiance from one who understood but refused to conform merely out of fear. "Your arrogance is astounding," Velos hissed now, clearly struggling against her usual composure. "You would dare challenge millennia old traditions in favor of fleeting affection? Will's response was quiet yet resolute. Traditions are meant for guidance, not oppression. Matriarch Velos could sense the conversation reaching a critical point, searched Will's unwavering gaze, as though seeking some kind of weakness there to exploit. Yet she found none, instead only steadfast conviction shining back from his hazel eyes. You have no grounds here, Will continued gently yet firmly, to dictate whose happiness matters and who deserves it less. What I offer, Selaria, is real. It doesn't need your approval or disapproval. Velos stood silent for a moment. Then the implications of this stand were clear, but there was indeed truth in Will's words that she could not ignore. Very well, Velos finally conceded with an almost reluctant nod. As long as it does not disrupt broader community norms, your relationship will remain unmolested by my authority. Will's relief was palpable. Even amidst his continued composure, he had neither expected nor sought a complete upheaval of tradition, but merely space for genuine connections to flourish. Thank you, Will said quietly yet sincerely before taking one step back and giving Velos what remained an outward show of respect. Well, strive not to cause any undue inconvenience. And with that, the meeting concluded on terms neither side had fully anticipated. The small victory none the less given how far they'd come from societal expectations. Outside once more, under the familiar warmth of sunlight filtering through the colony's greenery, and streets bustling around them again after their separate encounters with Matriarch Velos, Will found Selaria waiting quietly near her home. Her presence alone spoke volumes about this unusual path forward now that she dared walk it without fear or shame. Will, Selaria began softly as he approached, her voice carrying an unspoken acknowledgment of what had just transpired between them and the figures holding sway over their lives. I didn't expect, but thank you. He smiled warmly, then, while looking directly into those gentle amber eyes, they were bright with emotion now despite everything. Anytime, Will replied simply yet sincerely, his hand reaching out to touch hers lightly, a reminder perhaps of how far things had come already and where they might still go together. And I'm glad it worked. Selaria felt tears welling up once more, but these weren't those born from despair or self-pity. Instead, joy mingled with a profound sense that she no longer needed either to define herself anymore. I am too, Selaria whispered back softly, though her voice held strength now despite the lingering uncertainties. Today feels like maybe hope isn't gone after all. That evening, as twilight crept over the colony once more, Will and Selaria found themselves walking together amidst the quiet beauty of this shared moment, no longer constrained by societal judgment or fear. The stars above shone brightly against a darkening sky. They seemed closer somehow now that an impossible bond had begun to bridge differences between them. Together, under these heavens vast yet full of possibility, Will and Selaria stepped into tomorrow with hearts lightened despite challenges still looming ahead, an unexpected path towards understanding beauty beyond what others saw or dismissed in each other's reflections alone. The sun had set over the alien colony, casting a serene twilight across the landscape of gentle hills and verdant forests. Will, Montgomery and Selaria Vor'Maethi walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, their earlier conversation with Velos still fresh in their minds. The evening air was crisp but not biting, carrying hints of the earthy scent that filled the colony's farmland. Selaria's steps were steady as they made their way towards a secluded part of the Mithri settlement, a place Will had learned about from other settlers and knew well, the Crystal Garden. This garden held more than just beautiful plants. It was where older, Faded females like Selaria went to be forgotten by society. Will stopped outside the entrance, turning to face her with a gentle smile that belied his calm demeanor. "Selaria," he began softly, but she looked away, avoiding eye contact. He could see pain in every line of her body, pain from years of being told she was not good enough because of something as superficial and meaningless as the color of her hair. He reached out to hold her hands gently, noting how soft and cool they were compared to his own calloused skin. "Selaria," he repeated more firmly, but with no less kindness in his tone, "this place is meant for solitude. I know you come here often." She nodded silently, looking down at their entwined fingers. "I also know that it doesn't need to be this way." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle between them. "You don't have to hide or feel ashamed, because others won't see beyond what they think is unimportant about you," he continued softly yet firmly. Celaria's eyes fluttered up to meet his then, surprise mingling with a glimmer of hope so faint it was almost imperceptible. But there it was, a flicker that spoke volumes in the depths of her amber gaze. "Do I really have another choice?" she whispered back after a moment's silence had stretched between them like an unspoken question. "Yes," Will replied without hesitation, squeezing her hand reassuringly before releasing one to brush a stray strand from her gray crystalline hair. "Yes, you do." They walked in silent agreement for several moments longer, until they reached the heart of the garden, a small pond surrounded by delicate blue and white flowers that glowed softly with bioluminescence under moonlight. Will led Selaria over to an ancient-looking stone bench placed near a cluster of these luminescent plants. The soft glow from them cast a warm light around her, making her appear ethereal against the dark backdrop of shadows beyond. He sat down next to her, but didn't let go. His hand remained on hers, as though holding on to this momentous conversation that was breaking years and millennia of societal barriers in just one act of kindness and understanding. Celaria's body stiffened initially at their closeness, unused perhaps to feeling such comfort from anyone other than fleeting acquaintances or distant relatives who saw her the same way society did an aging female with no future worth considering. But as Will spoke again, his voice, soft yet sure, began to relax slightly into his warmth. "My wife had gray hair too," he said quietly, looking up at the stars above them now visible through the thin canopy of leaves overhead. "At her end, when she was battling illness and life seemed so unfair, we both knew it wouldn't be long." Celaria's eyes widened ever so slightly as realization dawned on her face. "Yet," Will continued gently, but with a firmness that held no room for doubt in his own mind or heart now, "I told her every single day how beautiful she was, so much I loved everything about her still, including the silver hair and wrinkles." His gaze softened even more as he looked back down at Celaria's hand entwined with his. Tears began to form in Celaria's eyes, then not just tears of sadness, but now also those mingled with something new: hope, joy, disbelief that someone could still see her this way, despite everything she had been taught to believe about herself and others like her. She blinked them back fiercely at first, trying desperately to hold on to the facade of strength, no matter how fragile it felt. But Will wouldn't let those walls stand between them anymore now, when they were finally beginning to tear down, so many already crumbling under his unwavering acceptance and affection for Selaria as she was now. "Selaria," he murmured, lifting her chin gently with one finger beneath her jawline to meet her gaze directly once more. She looked up, then, eyes shining through the dim light cast by glowing flowers around them, reflecting in pools of moonlight scattered everywhere amidst greenery and stone pathways leading deeper into this garden meant for solitude, yet finding here instead a connection unlike any shed ever experienced before now. "You are not fated," Will said firmly but tenderly. You're just different, experienced, wise." His words hung heavy in the air, between them a stark contrast to all others Selaria had heard throughout her life about herself, and what aging meant for a Vor'Maethi woman past their breeding prime. "And kind," he continued quietly yet with conviction that touched something deep within Selaria's heart now free from doubt. "And to me, you are perfect." Tears streamed down Selaria's face, then she let out an almost imperceptible sob as emotions bubbled up inside her, spilling over into this moment of unexpected beauty between them. She looked at Will through blurry eyes yet saw him clearly, saw the sincerity in his gaze, and felt it resonate within herself too. "My crystalline hair," she murmured hoarsely, after a few moments of silent tears slipping silently down cheeks still wet from earlier. "It catches moonlight like silver fire." Her voice was barely audible, but filled with tremulous emotion now that her barriers were breaking under the weight of Will's acceptance and love towards her exactly as she was. Will smiled softly at this, reaching out to brush a tear away gently before cupping both sides of Selaria's face tenderly in his hands. "Yes," he agreed quietly, looking deeply into those amber eyes again now full of unshed tears, but also joy and something new, belief that maybe there could be beauty beyond what others saw or dismissed about her. "And I think it's beautiful," Will added softly before leaning forward to kiss the top of Selaria's forehead gently, more a gesture of affection than anything else, yet one filled with an ocean of emotion between them now. "Just like you are." Selaria closed her eyes briefly at this, taking in that simple act and all its accompanying words as she had just begun, allowing herself to believe once more, not because it was what others told her, but due solely from Will's unwavering acceptance. I don't know how to thank you," Selaria whispered finally, after a moment of silent reflection under his touch. She opened her eyes again, then looking directly at him with gratitude shining brightly in them now amidst everything else she felt. Will smiled warmly, squeezing her hands lightly once more before letting go so they could sit side by side on the bench properly, though not releasing their connection entirely. It was clear from here forward there would be no going back to what Selaria had known before this moment under moonlit garden flowers that now held a new kind of magic between them. "You don't have to," Will replied simply yet sincerely, leaning slightly towards her so his shoulder brushed hers gently, a reminder perhaps more than words alone could convey how much this place and these moments meant for both of them despite its history. "Just promise me you'll never stop seeing yourself as beautiful again no matter what anyone else says." Selaria's eyes welled up with fresh tears, then but now mostly joyous ones, amidst lingering disbelief that someone could accept her so wholly, without reservation or prejudice about age or status in society. She began softly before taking a deep breath. "I will try, if you'll help me see myself as beautiful too." Will's smile softened even more at this. He nodded slowly yet sincerely, looking directly into Selaria's eyes now full of renewed hope amidst emotions running high between them. "Of course," he agreed quietly. They sat there together then, under moonlit sky, surrounded by softly glowing flowers that caught both their gazes and attention, in turn each one reflecting back pieces of this new connection forming between two beings so different yet finding common ground now through acceptance and understanding. Each society had failed before. Selaria felt something shift within herself as they sat side by side, her thoughts running wild with possibilities and dreams she hadn't dared consider until just moments ago, when Will's words cut through years of societal conditioning to show there could indeed be beauty beyond what others saw or dismissed in someone like her past their breeding prime, yet full of life, love, kindness, wisdom. She looked up at him, then feeling the warmth from this moment linger between them long after his initial declaration had taken root inside her heart and mind alike. "You've given me so much," Selaria whispered softly, but with conviction now that she was starting to believe it herself despite all else society told otherwise about aging females in Mithri culture. Will's smile softened even more at this. He squeezed her hand gently again before releasing it completely, though leaving no doubt they remained connected through everything beyond just physical touch words. Emotions shared and accepted fully between them now. "I'm glad I could help," he replied quietly yet sincerely, looking directly into Selaria's eyes, still shining brightly despite earlier tears. "And there's so much more to come," Will added softly, after a moment of reflection together under moonlit sky full of stars, reflecting back at them amidst greenery, a round garden pond glowing with bioluminescence. Together, Selaria felt something shift within herself, the note reigniting alongside joy and disbelief, wrapped tightly in renewed belief that maybe there was beauty beyond what others dismissed about her after all. "We will see," she agreed quietly yet firmly, looking directly back at Will, now feeling same warmth between them linger on despite everything else society might try to impose upon them going forward. "We'll find it together." Will's smile widened, then reaching out once more to take Selaria's hand gently in his own again, as reminder perhaps of all they had just shared under moonlit garden flowers, catching both their gazes and attention amidst renewed possibilities now opening before them. "Let's do that," he agreed softly yet firmly, looking directly into Selaria's eyes, still shining brightly with everything else she felt inside too despite earlier tears. Together, and so began a new journey for Will Montgomery and Selaria Vor'Maethi, filled with hope, understanding, love beyond what society could measure or judge based solely on appearances and age alone. They walked back towards the heart of Colony together then, under starlit sky full of promise stretching ahead, despite challenges looming in shadows yet to be faced, but now armed against them, not just individually anymore, but united by something far greater than any societal norms ever imposed, love that saw beauty beyond what others dismissed about each other and themselves alike. Under twilight's embrace, Will led Selaria past familiar streets bustling with life, even as night fell over Colony. They walked arm in arm, amidst renewed possibilities now stretching ahead, under vast yet full of possibility heavens. They both felt closer to despite challenges still looming ahead. Today had marked a turning point for Themon that saw beauty beyond societal judgments and self-doubt alike. And though many roads lay before them, Will held Selaria's hand tightly in his own as symbol of their new connection amidst all uncertainties yet to be faced together. Together under moonlit sky full of stars, reflecting back at them amidst greenery, a round garden pond glowing with bioluminescence, they stepped into tomorrow with hearts lightened despite challenges still looming ahead, an unexpected path towards understanding beauty beyond what others saw or dismissed in each other's reflections alone. Will and Selaria stepped out of their shared cottage into the early morning light, hand in hand. The colony was waking up around them, soft hum of machines starting for another day's work, the distant trills of alien birds singing greetings to dawn. Will squeezed Selaria's hand gently before releasing it completely, leaving no doubt that they were connected beyond just physical touch words. emotions shared and accepted fully between them now. The couple had returned from their moonlit walk in a state of quiet resolution. The bond they felt was tangible, something neither could ignore or deny anymore. They knew the path ahead would not be easy. Societal norms on Mithri were deeply entrenched, but both Will and Selaria were determined to find beauty beyond what others dismissed about them. "Ready for another day?" Will asked softly as he looked at Selaria with a warm smile in his hazel eyes. She nodded, her gentle amber gaze softening even more under the sincerity of his tone and gesture. "I'm glad I could help," she replied quietly yet sincerely, looking directly into Will's eyes, still shining brightly despite earlier tears. "And there's so much more to come," Will added softly, after a moment of reflection together beneath the moonlit sky full of stars reflecting back at them amidst greenery around their garden pond glowing with bioluminescence. Selaria felt something shift within herself, the note reigniting alongside joy and disbelief, wrapped tightly in renewed belief that maybe there was beauty beyond what others dismissed about her. "We will see," she agreed quietly yet firmly, looking directly back at Will, now feeling the same warmth between them linger on despite everything else society might try to impose upon them going forward. "We'll find it together." Will's smile widened, then reaching out once more to take Selaria's hand gently in his own again, as a reminder perhaps of all they had just shared under moonlit garden flowers, catching both their gazes and attention amidst renewed possibilities now opening before them. "Let's do that," he agreed softly yet firmly, looking directly into Selaria's eyes, still shining brightly with everything else she felt inside too despite earlier tears. Together, their journey began anew in the soft light of dawn, a new chapter filled with hope, understanding, and love beyond what society could measure or judge based solely on appearances and age alone. Hand in hand, they walked back towards the heart of the colony, under starlit skies full of promise stretching ahead, though many roads lay before them, now armed against any challenge, not just individually anymore, but united by something far greater than societal norms ever imposed, love that saw beauty beyond what others dismissed about each other and themselves alike. As Will led Selaria through familiar streets bustling with life, even as night fell over the colony, they walked arm in arm amidst renewed possibilities, stretching ahead under vast yet full of possibility heavens. The couple felt closer to these challenges despite uncertainties looming on the horizon. Their connection was a shield against any societal judgment or self-doubt that might come knocking. Today marked a turning point for Themon, where beauty beyond societal judgments and personal doubts were revealed, not just acknowledged, but embraced wholeheartedly by two souls seeking validation in an unyielding world. Though challenges still loomed ahead, under moonlit skies full of stars reflecting back at them amidst greenery around their garden pond glowing with bioluminescence, Will held Selaria's hand tightly, symbolizing their new connection amidst all uncertainties yet to be faced. Together they stepped into tomorrow, with hearts lightened, ready for whatever awaited them, a path towards understanding beauty beyond what others saw or dismissed in each other alone. The news of Will and Selaria's relationship quickly spread through the colony. Gossip buzzed like a swarm of bioluminescent insects under moonlight. Some whispers filled with curiosity, others with disdain. But as the days passed, more fated females found courage to approach older humans who saw their worth not just in physical appearances, but beyond them entirely. In a small community gathering held by matriarch Velos at the heart of Mithri culture and society, an uneasy tension hung heavy in the air. The matriarch stood tall amidst her peers, eyes narrowed with disapproval as she addressed those present regarding Will and Selaria's bond. "Such unions go against our traditions," she began sternly, voice carrying across the gathering space, even as it echoed through minds connected by telepathic bonds unique to Mithri society. "Aging females should accept their fate, letting younger generations take over." Selaria stood beside Will amidst a group of other elders and humans who supported them openly now for once. Some glanced nervously at Velos, knowing the weight she carried in shaping cultural norms, yet others looked back with quiet defiance. "We believe there is beauty beyond what society measures," said one elder female, whose crystalline hair had faded to soft gray like Selarias, a woman named Leary, whose words resonated deeply within many present. "Their bond reminds us that worth extends far past physical appearances alone." Leary. His statement sparked murmurs of agreement from several others, some nodding solemnly, while others exchanged looks filled with hope or resolve despite lingering doubts. "We cannot ignore these changes," another elder male spoke up, Selaria Vor'Maethi, a respected advisor in the colony. "Our society thrives on innovation and adaptation. If younger generations see older members finding happiness outside traditional norms, perhaps they will reconsider how we view aging." Velos frowned deeply at Tever's words, yet could not refute them entirely. She was well aware that many within Mithri culture were growing tired of discarding their elders based purely upon outdated notions of beauty and fertility. The idea lingered uncomfortably in the air. Change was inevitable, but acceptance remained a challenge. Will watched closely from Selaria's side, understanding the gravity of this moment for both cultures involved. Could only hope that his love for her would serve as an example, showing others that age did not diminish worth or beauty. "Then let us begin to redefine what it means to be beautiful," he offered calmly yet confidently into the room's silence after Tever's speech. His voice carried strength and conviction, eyes meeting those of many present with sincerity. Selaria squeezed Will's hand gently. In silent support together, they stood firm amidst growing murmurs of approval among attendees, now more open towards considering new perspectives rather than dismissing out of hand. Weeks turned into months as the relationship between Will and Selaria became increasingly publicized within their colony. Other fated females began meeting with older humans who saw their worth not just in physical appearances, but beyond them. Entire connections formed based on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine affection rather than societal expectations dictating otherwise. Society shifted subtly yet significantly under these new dynamics. Conversations about aging evolved gradually as people started questioning deeply rooted beliefs around desirability and value. Slowly but surely, cracks appeared in the rigid structure of Mithri culture, where youth was revered above all else, opening doors towards inclusivity and acceptance instead. One evening during a traditional ceremony celebrating bonds between individuals regardless of societal labels, Will and Selaria prepared to formally unite their lives before an audience representing both human settlers and older generations within Mithri society. The air buzzed with anticipation mixed with nerves as preparations concluded. Everyone knew this was more than just another bonding ritual. When the time came for them to step forward under twinkling lights adorning ceremony grounds, Will took Selaria's hand confidently while she looked up at him with gratitude and love shining in her eyes. As they approached their designated spot amidst gathered attendees, whispers of admiration mingled quietly among voices expressing support or curiosity. alike about what exactly this meant moving forward. As the ceremony began under soft glow from floating lanterns, above ancient chants resounding through air carrying spiritual significance for both parties involved, a moment froze within hearts present there that night. Will placed a small pouch containing Selaria's crystalline hair strands into her hands. It had been collected during days leading up to this event, symbolizing transition yet continuity. When she held those delicate strands against sunlight streaming softly through trees surrounding ceremony site, something extraordinary happened. The grayish hue shone brilliantly once again like sparkling sapphire under warm rays. Gasps of astonishment rose from crowd watching closely as elder-Mithri woman stepped forward with soft eyes reflecting awe toward sight before her. "Perhaps we forgot what beauty truly means," she murmured quietly yet clearly enough for many around to hear echoes of truth within words spoken so simply yet powerfully profound under circumstances now changing, lost, ending perceptions deeply embedded over centuries among species alike. Will leaned down then, gently lifting Selaria's hand and placing a soft kiss upon it, a gesture full of affectionate respect symbolizing everything this relationship had come to represent for both individuals beyond societal constraints or expectations placed unfairly upon them, based solely appearances, judged by rigid norms long upheld without question, until now finally being challenged openly within community setting. "I never forgot," he whispered back quietly yet firmly, looking directly into Selaria's eyes still shining brightly with same warmth and belief shared between them during earlier walks under moonlit skies, full of promise stretching ahead despite challenges looming even amidst new beginnings forming together. As night fell over the colony once more following formal ceremony completed successfully, under ceremonial lights fading gradually leaving stars visible overhead, instead, Will led Selaria back towards their cottage arm in arm, hearts filled with renewed hope and understanding about beauty beyond what others dismissed as mere societal judgments or personal doubts. Alike they walked through streets now buzzing quieter than usual amidst reflections stirring among minds present there throughout day. Their bond had not only strengthened between them, but inspired change within greater community, pushing boundaries of acceptance further past rigid norms previously imposed solely upon youthfulness, valued far above all else without questioning merits behind those ideals ever before, now challenging deeply rooted beliefs around worth and desirability beyond physical appearances, alone opening doors towards inclusivity and genuine connections formed based on mutual respect rather than superficial judgments. And so Will Montgomery and Selaria Vor'Maethi stood united under vast yet full of possibility heavens stretching ahead despite challenges still looming beneath, shadows waiting to be faced. They walked together now armed against uncertainties, not just individually anymore, but strengthened by shared resolve found amidst love that saw beauty beyond societal norms ever imposed, embracing each other fully and unapologetically in a world finally beginning to see true worth within themselves as well.